since I stood in front of the old state capitol in Springfield, Illinois, and announced that I was running for the presidency of the United States of America. You know, it's a majestic site, it's a historic site, the old state capitol, because this is where Abraham Lincoln stood and delivered his famous speech, stating that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And the place that he said farewell to his friends before he went off to Washington to serve as president, and didn't return to Springfield until after his death. And I was a little nervous that day, I have to admit. And it wasn't because of the magnitude of the decision I've made or the extraordinary beauty of the site and its historical significance. It wasn't because I had to make a speech, because I make a lot of speeches these days. It was because it was 7 degrees outside. It was cold. And I was worried nobody was going to show up. And I told my staff, what's going to happen when I announce for president and nobody's there? It'll be humiliating, and C-SPAN will capture the whole thing. And they said, no, Senator, we think some people are going to show up. And 17,000 people showed up. We couldn't really recognize anybody because they had mufflers on and scarves around them, and big, gloves and boots, blankets. So you could only just see their eyes. But there were 17,000 people who showed up, and it was a magnificent affair, and we had just a wonderful spirit, a sense that people were ready to start taking their country back. And we took that spirit to Iowa, and we went to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We went to Waterloo and Iowa Falls and Ames, Iowa. Everywhere we went, we were seeing these great crowds. And I was especially enjoying myself because one of the toughest things about politics is being away from your family all the time. But this time, this was a family affair. I had my wife, Michelle, with me, and I had my 8-year-old daughter, Malia, and my 5-year-old daughter, Sasha, and I had my mother-in-law, godparents. We shipped in some cousins for the girls to play with, and they seemed like they were enjoying themselves. So we're barreling down the highway in Iowa. At a certain point, I asked my daughters, I said, are you guys doing okay? And they said, no, Daddy, this is great. We're really having fun. You should take us more often. And then my 8-year-old turns to me and she looks and says, what are we doing here again? And my 5-year-old, she knows everything, so she turned back and she clicks her tongue. She says, this has to do with Daddy's president thing. Which was accurate as far as it went. But if I had time to give a more fulsome answer, what I would have told my daughters that day is the same thing that I would say to you here today. What are we doing here? We are here because the country calls us. We're here because history beckons us. We're here because the nation is at a crossroads, internationally and domestically. And we have a set of challenges that are as significant as any challenge that has been faced in any generation. And the decisions that we make today are going to say a lot, not just about our lives, but are going to speak to the lives of our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And so the question then becomes, how well are we able to stand up to those challenges? How seriously do we take them? How boldly do we address them? We know what the challenges are. We know we've got a healthcare system that's broken, that's bankrupting families and bankrupting the country. We know that. We know that we've got an education system that is educating some of our children, but not all of our children. That despite the slogan is leaving too many children behind. In fact, we've got a program called No Child Left Behind that left the money behind for No Child Left Behind. And we know that at the rate we're going, our children are not going to be able to compete in math and science and for the jobs of the future, because these days they don't have to compete just against young people in California or young people in Texas. They've got to compete against folks in Beijing or Bangalore. We know that we suffer from the absence of an energy policy. And not only do we get taxed by the spot oil market every time that the Saudis decide they want to turn off the spigot or there's a disruption in Nigeria. We know that we're sending $800 million a day to some of the most hostile nations on earth, funding both sides of the war on terrorism, and in the bargain, we're melting the polar ice caps and threatening the very well-being of the planet. We know that. We know that we've got an economy that has never been more productive. It's never seen higher corporate profits. And yet, although it's serving some very well, the vast majority of people have seen wages stagnate, salaries stagnate. We've seen the burdens and benefits of globalization not spread evenly across the economy. Entire communities being left behind. People who worked in a plant 20, 30 years suddenly find the rug pulled out from under them and seeing themselves lose their jobs, lose their health care, lose their pensions, having to compete with their teenage kids to get a job for $7 an hour at the local Walmart. Most of all, we know that we've got a war that should have never been authorized and should have never been waged. A war that has cost us almost $500 billion. A war that's cost us almost 3,200 of our bravest young men and women. A war that has made us less safe and has seen our standing in the world decline and diminish. And so the question is, how do we find ourselves in these circumstances? How is it that we've got these sets of challenges that we understand threaten our well-being and the well-being of our children, and yet each and every year we don't seem to do anything about it? And it's my assertion that it has to do in part with the biggest challenge, and that is that we are now divided from our government. That what Lincoln talked about, a house divided, at the time he was talking about a house divided, half slave and half free. Now we've got a people that are divided from their government. We don't believe our government. We don't trust our government. We're cynical about it. We think that the fat cats and the special interests write the legislation. The oil companies writing the energy bills. The drug companies writing the drug bills. So we don't have confidence. We don't have confidence that those that are making decisions on our behalf have the public interest in mind. And politics feels like a business instead of a mission. And power is always trumping principle. And we hear a lot of rhetoric, but very little follow-through. And so people get discouraged. People get discouraged. And they withdraw into themselves and they decide, I don't want to be involved with it. I don't expect anything from government. I hope that at best government does me no harm. But it's just a distraction from the rest of my life.